Is Richard with us too?
Yep.
Okay, I just didn't see him.
And I do see that we have Councillor Gleistein in the audience.
Oh, good.
So, Councillor Gleistein, if you want to raise your hand, do you want to come in or do you want to stay in the background? Raise your hand if you want to come in, otherwise we'll. Oh,
Is
she
Richard-
does.
Is Richard?
Bring
with
her
us?
in.
Yep.
Okay, I just didn't see him.
And I do see. All right, I think we are all set.
So I'm just trying to set up so I can see everybody. So I'm trying to figure out how to do the, oh, here, I think it's over here, right
Yep.
there.
You.
Aha, I got it. Finally, I've been on Zoom all morning, so I'm already zoomed out and I have 2 to go. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Sorry for the lateness at 11:40. Looks like we're all present and Betsy's the only counselor. Is there any public?
No other public. And
Okay.
Betsy is available to participate should she choose to.
Okay, no problem.
Right,
So-
I'm just gonna stay mute and camera off, but I'll definitely feel free to, I'll be around and ask me a question if you have any, or I'll pipe in if I have something, if it works out in the flow of your conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
So our specific agenda today was, well, she says review of Article 6 do I have the right? No, yeah, it's supposed to be review of Article 5. So, yep, I got the right agenda. So Richard sent it out to us over the weekend, and thank you so much for getting it out to us early. And Liam, for the sake of Betsy and any public who might come in late, can you put it on the screen?
I would, Richard, could you forward that to me? I don't know if, did you send that to me?
I thought you were, I
I
thought you were copied. He sent it Saturday.
Okay. Let me just do a quick search. I'm
I
sure.
must have missed it too. Let me look.
Well, I've got mine all printed out. I think it was on Saturday that you sent it, if I'm not
All right.
mistaken, right?
It was Saturday. Yeah, it went out to you guys Saturday at 3:54.
And I've read it and printed it, Richard. Thank you. When you're self-employed, it's 7 days a week. Are you sending it again for him?
I am, I'm just trying to
Right.
get to the emails.
Right.
I don't have anything on Saturday. Like, I got nothing from anybody on Saturday.
Yeah, I just checked my spam folder. It didn't come through there.
Oh, nice. No?
Your names were all on it. I got it.
Mine went from Friday to Sunday.
Well, I just sent it again, so you should.
Okay, all right.
I'll open it
Yeah,
up.
it's not a lot of reading and it's pretty clear. So we can go through it together. Richard, maybe because they didn't get it in advance, once he opens it up, you could maybe walk us through it.
Mhm.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, go ahead, because otherwise we're wasting time.
Yeah, again, I went to my York email address, which was probably a response to an earlier. That was
Probably was, yeah.
Oh, that's my fault, but that won't happen with me again. I wiped it out.
Bear with me. I'll pull it right up.
Still didn't come in on my email.
Well, you're across town or something. you
Yeah,
know.
maybe. In the downs, it can make it into the downs.
Great. So is this?
Hold on 1 second, I just gotta just,
That's it.
this is Rich. I'm on another call, can I give you a call back later?
All right, Richard, just need to unmute. I didn't want that to be.
So page 1,
Yeah.
it's just putting the title, but
what I did on that, I'm sorry, I just had to take a quick call. What I did
Nope.
on this was looked at the document that Liam had forwarded on the budget and the capital plan, the capital improvement plan. That plan is pretty inclusive. I mean, actually, you guys were right. I mean, they do a good job with laying it out. It tends to be a little bit short-term oriented because it's focusing on existing equipment primarily. And so what I've done here is identified this not as a capital budget, because already there's a budget and there's an improvement plan in the budget, a capital improvement plan in the budget. So what this really is a capital plan. And that's an important distinction because it is not something that ultimately has to be approved by the town council. It's presented to the council, it's informational, but it's a requirement. Currently, the budgeting that's done now with respect to the capital planning is not part of what's necessary to be done, but it's done as part of the budget. This would make it required. So the first thing is that we change the article from just a budget to a budget and a capital plan. And I've made that change all the way through. Okay. So if you scroll down a bit on that, Liam. What I've added is a new section, which is 502.2. Remember, 502.1 is the budget. This 5.202 is going to be the capital plan. So every 3 years, not less frequently than every 3 years, and figured you had to begin at some time, so I said 2023. So both the manager and the board will prepare and submit to the council a plan, and then the plan has to include all of the items that are listed here as point 1, point 2, point 3, and so on. The intent here is to require them, both the manager and the Board of Education, to do essentially a capital inventory. Identify all structures, infrastructure, buildings, equipment that have useful lives in excess of 10 years. So that's what we're focusing on here. Now, we're not focusing on somebody's computer or even in some instances, even a piece of equipment that can only last 5 years. This is 10-year property. They have to do an assessment of the condition of all such assets, and all of those are defined now as capital assets. What they have to do is provide estimates of the cost to repair and replace those assets when they need repair and replacement. So it's the cost plus the timing of those costs that is necessary for those assets to continue to meet the needs of the town and the Department of Education for the next 30 years. So here now we're extending this out quite a way, but remember, it's only informational. There's nothing here that is going to get voted on. But so it's to provide information to the town council and ultimately to the citizens. And then I note that in preparing the plan, because we have a long-range planning committee, both manager and board ought to consult with the planning committee to make sure that whatever growth and development is built into their analysis is reflected in this capital plan. So that's the intent here. And what would have to be produced. And it's every 3 years. That way, you know, every council member gets to see at least one plan because the council serves for 3 years. So there will always be a plan that council member is reviewing. The next section, 503, speaks to the adoption issue. And so here what we're saying is that the council will adopt the budget and the plan. But if the council doesn't adopt the plan, there's no problem. I mean, you don't have to rely on the last one. You don't have to decide what plan you're going to put in place because the plan has really no effect in the current period. Like, there's no commitment to the plan one way or another by the council, but I figure that they ought to adopt it or at least be presented with the option for adopting it and modifying it like they would a budget. But if they don't do it, you'll notice that there's no automatic plan that gets triggered. There are no consequences for this with respect to the tax rates, property tax issues, appropriations, none of those things. This is strictly a planning exercise that is now formalized through this budget process. So that's what I've laid out here. So one way of looking at it, there's lots of other ways of doing this, of course. And it addresses, I think it addresses one of the items that the group that provided comments to us proposed. They wanted a 10-year capital plan. This really is a 30-year one.
Yeah, Steve Hanley put in that an updated 10-year projection of capital project and facilities, including for the schools. That kind of goes in line with what you have, Richard.
So the difference, the major difference between those requests are the 10 and the 30 year. I don't have Steve's, I thought I had Steve's in front of me actually, because maybe that's what you were referring to. Okay. Yeah, okay, I do have it, that it was submitted. So I'm trying to see if Steve's was more, if he was suggesting it should be voted on where you're giving them options of consequence. Let me put it that way, if they don't vote. Because there's consequences if they don't vote on, the council doesn't vote on the budget. No consequences if they don't vote on a capital plan, which I understand why.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to see if Steve is,
He just said projection. It doesn't say that it would.
yeah, there's no consequences.
No.
Yeah.
What I think is,
Although it does say approval.
yeah, this should be distinguished, I think, from the budget. Matt, I don't think it makes any sense to have 30-year or even 10-year projections of capital needs in a one-year operating budget. The budget has to have capital expenditures in it, and it does, but they're only for that 1 year. And so I don't think we ought to think of this as part of a budget. I think it really is a plan.
So you're trying to make this a more formal process. Liam, I have a question for you. When you're talking with Tom or with other departments informally, or maybe in a little bit more formal discussion, how far do you tend to look out? 5, 10 years? Just.
Well, I think it's probably that question is probably answered by the existing capital plan. That goes out. I think it depends on the need. I mean, some things are, can be pretty easily forecasted, and other things are a bit more challenging. Certainly, new large new capital requests like a new school. I mean, I don't know. Some of those things can be somewhat predictable, but sometimes they ramp up pretty quickly. That'd be a new ask. Replacement equipment, that should be able to be forecasted with some pretty decent data.
Yeah. I like Richard's idea, except it seems like, boy, it's to forecast that for a growing town. It's like, I guess it's doable, but it just seems like I'd be scratching my head.
So Richard, why 30 years? That was my first reaction. Is I know it's a recommendation and not binding, but in terms of projecting, for example, school population and the explosion of permits, and then changing the rules about building permits so that you can divide them into parts so that there's more building permits. I mean, that's really far out to project, because the rules change so quickly in this town about what's permitted in terms of building, especially homes, apartments. I like the idea. I just would
Well,
support a shorter time.
Yeah, I would agree on that.
Most of what we're looking at here is existing infrastructure. I mean, when you look at what the town has actually built as new in the last 30 years, as opposed to replacement, there's really very little. I mean, we haven't built a lot of new roads, right? We replace them and we repair them. You know, we haven't built a lot of new fire stations. What we do is we repair and replace them.
Mhm.
Police department, town hall. I mean, those kinds of things are existing. You know, how long do they last? I thought 30 years was, you know, like the amount of time that you would generally sort of look out and say with respect to those kinds of assets. On
I
the
see.
newer things, the newer stuff, which is in 2.4, those, you know, can be short term. I mean, for instance, we've been talking about a community center that's in the capital improvement plan. It's noted as a $35 million item out 5 years, right? So the new stuff might be a much shorter time period, and you have to react to that. But I think the primary focus here is on the existing, because that's really where all of our wealth lies. It's in our existing assets. Incrementally, there's very little new assets that the town adds year in, year out.
Richard, I think that makes a good point because you guys may know better than me, but I believe the life of the new public safety building we just built was estimated by that committee as 30 years. So these things, even when we approve them, they do come on, you know, I mean, I'm hoping, unfortunately, I'm at an age I probably, you know, might not be around, but, you know, I would think maybe, you know, that building could be stretched more than 30 years, but, you know, town hall, we've had that, you know, so yeah, these major assets like that, I think at least, you know, have been kind of recently given a lifespan of 30 years. We certainly use the old public safety building a lot longer than that. So, yeah, if we're able to distinguish, you know, what you're saying, and then the new ones, you know, could be added into this existing framework so that, you know, we'd be able to look out towards the future when we're going to add something major and what that's going to do, you know, to the taxes as well as, you know, the debt and all those types of things.
Well, I don't know how good my memory is, so I'm trying to put this in context, but I believe that it's been in the last 30 years that we built a new library, enlarged 3 elementary schools, built a middle school, built a high school, which is our largest debt, if I'm not mistaken, that we have. So that's all new stuff. I don't even think of the roads, and that's because I think of the roads as initially being paid for by the developers these days, but maybe not totally. I know certainly when the school complex was built, those interior roads, which now have formal names and are used by more than school people, were supposed to be paid for over time and with different kinds of money. So maybe 30 years is a good number. You know, as I think,
I'm not wedded to 30. I mean, 25 is fine, 40 is fine. I mean, the important point here is that it's not 5 years or 10 years that we're looking out. We are really looking out longer. And
I just think about the changes, and look at how fast technology changes, architecture. You're talking about green, you know, this green development. So green technologies. So it seems like in 10 years, it might be, you know, I don't know.
But as I understand it, you're not precluding us from adding anything new in there. It was just to say,
just kind of guess.
Yeah, I gave the example of, you know, Wentworth. You know, what do we think the lifespan is of Wentworth? I mean, so what was that projected to be? Like I said, I know with the new public safety building, they're saying it was 30 years. So those types of assets, if I'm understanding what you're saying, would go into this to understand, you know, how they're depreciating, what kind of things, you know, need to happen with them. And then, as you say, Alan, you know, as new technology comes online and, you know, we build a new school or whatever, you know, it gets put into the plan. But obviously a fire truck wouldn't be a 30-year because they don't last 30 years, you know, so not everything is going to go out 30 years. So maybe it's, maybe we're talking the life of the item. Maybe you want to see an asset plan, that is for the projected life of the item. Because we do have those numbers up front. We know what those are when we buy them, at least what we're projecting them to be. Now, that doesn't mean we don't stretch them out, but that's a story into itself. So, if the Public Safety Committee, actually said, we're building this life, because they do say that we built this for a 30-year lifespan, then what year is that comes on? So maybe it's not 30 years, maybe it's you want a capital plan that reflects the lifespan of the major assets, whether it be a fire truck or a plow truck or whatever.
Well, maybe it is good to look out that far to get you thinking a little bit. So,
Well, I guess I'm talking more like saying what our assets are,
Right.
so it's a different thing versus a capital plan. So we have an asset of this public
Right.
safety building, and we think it has a life of 30 years. And then, that might lead a future council to say, well, how do we extend that life? Well, it's, this year we have to do, a different kind of roofing, and we do need to put solar in it because of XYZ or something. And then that's going to extend the life of that. So, maybe I'm talking about a little something different that doesn't fit in with what Richard put in, of more of a, an asset list of, of what we have. So that's just food for thought. I don't want to get you guys off that topic. I did want to see if you wouldn't mind if I brought up one piece of this that kind of really came to the forefront this year with the everything that went on with COVID.
Does it relate to Article 5? Does it relate to this
Yes,
specifically?
relate to Article
Otherwise,
5.
ask you to hold it, because I want to make sure this discussion's complete.
It definitely relates to Article 5. So,
But to the capital plan idea,
no, not to the capital plan idea.
could you just hold that thought for a moment?
Absolutely.
So my view of this, Richard, is I support it. I like the language. I think it's clear. It's simple. I think the 30 years has some pros and cons to it. And I would like to have as our preliminary recommendation from our subcommittee that this go to the full committee, not only for the concept, but the idea that there's a consensus that we're not necessarily married to the 30 years. How does that meet with you, Alan and Richard?
Yeah, I agree. Richard's put some work into this, so he's thought about it, and
Because I think it's some good work, and
it's at least worth putting in front of the whole committee, and who knows, we may be able to tweak it a little bit, but I think Richard's done a good job.
well, I think that's the idea, but if there are things that this subcommittee feels strongly about, I mean, I think that our job is to advocate for it with
Right.
the whole group, and only any details on which there's some options that we not be married to. So are you married to that 30-year? Richard, did you put the 30 years in? Because I have no knowledge at all about what is the projected length of life for roads. Is it different for a state highway versus an interior road? Do you know?
Depends on how they were originally constructed. But normally asphalt roads are replaced on anywhere from, replaced meaning that they are resurfaced, anywhere from 15 to 20, 25 year basis, rolling basis. There are some that can obviously go faster if you got potholes or you got streams that go under them, those kinds of things. You just have to do it more often. 30 years is there's nothing magic about 30 years. 30 years is a generation. It's how far are we going to look out? It's new buildings usually have 30-year lives. I mean, it's, has been mentioned by Betsy on the, but obviously, trucks, major pieces of equipment may only have 12, 13-year lives. I mean, if we, one of our capital assets that we have are recreational fields. I mean, fields last forever, right? And so, the outdoor recreation trails, hiking opportunities, preserves, I mean, those last forever. And so, but but still you got to maintain them and you got to work on them and sort of make sure that they still meet the needs that they were set up for. So that's why, I just chose 30 as an arbitrary year. But if the committee ultimately wants to use 25 or 40, I've got no problems with that. The
Yeah.
important thing is it gets done.
Well, I usually think of maintenance of a field as being an operating budget, not a capital item. But building the field in the first place might be a capital item, but maybe not. I mean, there are some towns that save that because they have long-term capital plans, put money aside every year and they do not put it into a capital budget. But this town seems to put a lot of stuff into capital budgets that other places don't. And I think that some of those suggestions will be coming forward about what goes in.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the reference to the 3 years you made of 3 years because of the turnover of the
In 502.2, not less frequently than, just scroll up. Or scroll down. I'm sorry. I'm looking at, that's my fault, Liam.
Can't go up any farther. All right.
502.2. It's no
I
less.
thought he'd
frequent-
gone as far as he could.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
no less frequently than once every 3 years.
got it. Okay, well, so that it does allow for the kind of updates we've been talking about that addresses the technology.
And it doesn't start until 2023 because we already have a plan out. Or we've already, that's the next time that the town council's up for reelection, is that?
No, they're up every year. Some people are up every year.
Well, I guess just, I'm supportive of that implementation date only because we're starting FY22 budgets now. And so
Oh, I see. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that
Plus,
makes sense.
this has to go to referendum and who knows when it's gonna
No,
happen
that
in
makes sense.
2023 or thereabouts.
I guess just from my standpoint, from my opinion, whatever that's worth, probably not much, but I think it's a great exercise to go through. I think that it'll be, I think starting with sort of the asset list, whether it's equipment or whether it's facilities or whether it's preserves and public spaces. I think, again, some of them will be obvious. There's routine maintenance, which to Annalee's point, that's probably more operational, but you look at something like the turf and track, right? So that's a athletic field that has a lifespan that, we probably know as soon as we lay that down that there's a 15-year lifespan on something like a turf field, and we know what that expense generally is. Going back to some of our equipment, the ladder truck we just replaced for 1.2 million, that had been in operation for 23 years. So we could reasonably say that's a 20-year cycle. And I think if this whole exercise is about knowing as much of it's like any other planning thing, the farther you look out, the more hazy it is.
Mhm.
Things start to come into focus as it gets closer to the day. And so I think it's a really valuable exercise. And so I think in that regard, 30 years, maybe that's not too far off if we have equipment. Town Hall now is 28 years old, I believe. I don't think there's any need to talk about replacing Town Hall anytime soon. But I think I think by doing this, the council will be asking the right questions, and we'll know as things start to clear up and become more in focus what the needs are. So I think it's a great idea.
I like the language you put in there, Richard, that the long range planning committee is involved because they're probably looking at that
Mhm.
distance.
Yeah, I would maybe.
That's good. I like that.
I would maybe question that one because they don't tend to look at finances. So their charge needs to be, the committee that really looks at finances is a council committee. It's
But no, this doesn't have anything to do with the financing side. It's you're planning for the long-term assets. What new assets do we need? And that's going to be based on how much growth there is, what kind of development there is.
right.
That's what that is related to.
Yeah. Well, just the way they've typically operated, I think you would kind of need to expand their charge because they're not looking at assets and things like that. I know it sounds kind of odd, but for example, they've been working on the comp plan. That's, one thing they've been working on. So, it's definitely, more, I mean, it's a great thing the committee could kind of talk about, focus on, so the larger committee, whether that would be the right spot to focus that work. It's a good thought. And, I really like that you would include this in the charter, because it's pretty easy for a council that's so busy to not have to get this done. And so by putting it in the charter, I think what you're doing is elevating it to say, this is important to the town, and it's assuming the voters voted in, and then it really has to get done. So I think it's a great add. I mean, obviously there's more discussion to be had, and I'm not saying how I'd vote on it one way or the other, because that wouldn't be appropriate, but I think it's really good work.
No, I think bringing in other committees, I like that from the perspective that whether they consider finances or not, that's sometimes the problem is not enough consideration of what these things cost is made. So it seems to me if they're talking about downtowns, neighborhoods, sidewalks, skate parks, all of that, is that in their plan that every neighbor should have a skate park or something? That's a cost. So that's for the council to worry about. So no.
Good point. I might just have the council appoint the committee.
I think we're ready to go with that.
Yep.
I think there's consensus on that. So you had something that you had wanted to add, Betsy? And I'm just rushing because we commit to an hour meeting.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just pulling up. I may look distracted, but I'm looking at my own copy of the charter. So
sure.
I have to assume, when the last people did the charter and wrote all of these procedures for the budget, that they did it this way on purpose. But the way that it's rolled out in particular for the town and if you look at how ordinances are passed, they have to be passed with a first reading and actually orders, and the budget becomes an order, a first reading, a public hearing, and a second reading. And because the budget becomes an order, we do that the same way. And so this year, it became a little bit conflicted about, there are times when the town manager wants to give us a budget presentation. And it started the 60-day clock this year, according to how some people were reading the charter. We actually got the town attorney to say, well, the town manager could give a presentation on the budget, and then the clock could start when the council formally accepts the budget at first read. So I think it would be good to make that language clear. I think the 60 days is fine, but the 60-day clock should start, when the council accepts the budget from the town manager at first reading. And that may be, if we leave it open enough, it may be that first presentation. But this year being so unusual and almost in a crisis year with the budget in terms of COVID, we felt at one point we were locked in, so we kept canceling the meeting because we didn't think we were going to have enough information to drive this all forward within 60 days. But we wanted to see what the town manager had in place and what he was working on, and we wanted the town to see it. So of course we wanted it to be a public meeting. So we were able to work it out this year that the clock would really start at the first read. But I think that we should detail that out. I don't have the exact wording for you. I certainly could email you my thoughts. It may be that we don't need to even say anything here, although I think maybe a little bit about making the budget order more specific between first read, public hearing, and second read, since that's what we do, and that's what the rest of the charter and the policies dictate for orders. So there's just a kind of a lot to work out there, but there's that. And then there's also.
So you're suggesting, you're addressing section 503, I presume.
502 and 503. 502 refers to the 60 days beginning each fiscal year, but it's not very clear.
503 says 60 days too. That talks about how to toll the time.
Correct. So 503, so all of it is completely silent about first read or the council accepting the budget from the town manager. So,
well, 5021 is really clear. It's 60 days.
Well, I'm telling you, Anna Marie, this year it was, so Anna Marie, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Annalee, it was really not clear when
It was,
we were in a crisis situation. So I'm,
because it says prior to the beginning of each fiscal year, which is July 1. So it's 503 that's less clear.
yes, but what's not clear is whether or not if the town manager makes a budget presentation, is that the town council accepting the budget?
Is that the submission? Because there's nothing about accepting at all anywhere. You're right.
What I'm
It
saying,
says submit. The town manager shall submit is the word.
what I'm saying is this could better be written to talk about the
All
first
right.
read, the public hearing and the second read, and when the clock starts exactly, without changing too many words here.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Then the other thing is that if we don't pass a budget in 60 days, the whatever is presented at first read, which is usually very high, although we've worked on that as a council to make that not as high, to make it more realistic. But that is what is accepted as the budget. It does not go back to last year's budget, which is what people sometimes think it does. It does not. So I didn't know what this committee thought of that particular provision.
We've discussed that provision and agree that it needs to go forward. I think Richard gave a nice summary of how that can be interpreted, used or misused, depending on who you're talking about, the council, the manager, whomever. And so I think there is some interest in making some revisions to that. I know my personal interest is to say that the budget that is already, the last enacted budget, which would be the current budget, is in place until there's a new budget. And I plan for one of our subcommittee meetings to submit specific language that says that. I think that we have a subcommittee. I'm looking, I think we have one submission here that suggests that as well.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you're working on that, and that's kind of related to 502, 503, I'll
Yeah.
work on the wording for the clock, and
That'd be good, thanks.
that's for your consideration.
Another suggestion that was thrown out that we didn't spend much time on is changing the 60 to 90 days. But it sounds like that would make the situation you spoke about this year worse.
Well, I like the 60-day clock because, you know, it really means we have to drive through to a budget. I even hesitate to say it goes back to last year because, you know, I think maybe they have it that you have to drive through to a decision, which I think is the right thing, because we look at the first read that comes out, the first presentation, and, you know, that would drive taxes up by 6%. It kind of puts a fire under everyone, the BOE and the town council, to get a budget approved that can go to the voters for the school referendum, and that can be finalized from the town council. So, you know, I'm on the fence about taking that back because I think that that under normal circumstances, it's really good. But this year, you know, and who knows what the future holds. This year, it felt pretty risky because we knew we weren't going to raise taxes by 5 or 6%. We knew we had public work to do. I mean, when we could have Tom just do everything behind the scenes and the BOE bring forward a budget, but then the public doesn't get to have input on what we should keep and what we should cut. And that's where a lot of the discussions come about. And so, you know, if that work is all done by administration, you know, on the BOE side, and, you know, the other side just to get down to a certain point, then we lose a whole lot of valuable public input and discussion. So the idea that, you know, say, for example, you know, I mean, roads or, you know, or anything, you know, the turf fields, you know, was a big discussion. People wanted to weigh in on that. You know, so in normal years, this works really well. I just think this year, I want to think about it personally a little more and, you know, try to think of circumstances that could drive, you know, problems with this. It was very nerve-wracking this year. We had to cancel a meeting and push it off because we didn't we weren't getting the information. The big thing, of course, we weren't getting the information from the state that we needed, and the BOE, of course, they didn't have what they needed to know what to do for COVID. And so, under normal circumstances, I would say, hey, this is fine. This works well. And the 60-day clock and the fact that it would go to the first read, I think puts a fire under everybody to get their job done. But
So if you could get that, I'm going to just jump in because I'm looking at the clock. If you could, submit to us your suggestion
ideas around that. Yeah. I
on
definitely-
defining that when that 60-day clock begins to run, I think philosophically, there's people that are weighing in support the other items.
Right. Yep. I agree.
I'd like to jump to, we certainly have more than an hour's agenda here because good news is we've got some submissions from some people that I think we need to discuss. So under the Hamill, Hanley, I don't know who else's name is on there, but there was an item in box number 2. You see that it's not in the current. Oh, good. You've got it up because I was looking, I don't see any current language in the charter about this. But it says it wants to prohibit donations of any amount to any charities and whatever. And so I think we need to talk about that. I did not have a chance to look at the budget you sent us, Liam. Can somebody summarize who the town gave donations to last year for my knowledge?
I don't know offhand. I know that there is an annual allocation to nonprofits for specific things. I can try to find that. Well, there's some discussion. I'm not sure if anyone else came across it.
But that's for the provision of services though, right, Liam?
Well, it's not always. I mean, I think that there's sort of a public support component. Let me pull it up, and I'm sure there's a narrative to support it. But I don't think it's always for services rendered as much as it's in-town nonprofits that there's a contribution to Project Grace, things of that nature.
Yeah, that would, if not, we could put it on the agenda for maybe our next meeting instead of spending too much time on the clock today searching for that. Because I think we should discuss, we owe it to anybody who submits suggestions, in my opinion, to discuss them, but I don't have enough information to know. I just know I follow town meetings and newspapers, and sometimes that's the first to go on those town meetings where they vote things out. So let's go to number 3.
Just on that, Annalee, before you jump off of that, I mean,
Yeah, sure.
they want to get clarity from the people who submitted this. But for example, if we're using Maine Public Radio, now that's a nonprofit. They don't charge for their services, but if you make a contribution to them because you're using the service, that's like giving money to a charity. The other thing too is that we may allow certain activities to take place on town or school property that are supported by nonprofits. And those would be contributions in kind to nonprofits. So we have to be
like Girl Scout meetings, you mean, Boy Scouts?
or anything, yeah. And so I think we have to maybe we want to go back to the folks who sent it in and ask them, and if it's, what they mean by using taxpayer funds. If it's merely a cash donation, then that's a more limited, and I think that makes more sense. But if it's the use of in kind as well as payment for services, I think we need to be a little bit more careful.
I think that's really, really a good point. So you're right.
It looks like they're saying taxpayer funds. So I guess you're right, though. We should ask them, but it seems
We
like
should make sure.
yeah, it seems like it talks about actual money.
Yeah, I could follow up with that, and I'm sure I could do it by our next meeting. So thanks, that's really a good point. Change the municipal budget that fails to adopt. Oh, we just had that discussion, and that was one of my interests too, because I think Richard put it well, that last time, the way he summarized how that can be used in good ways and in nefarious ways. So we'll put some language together. So now no town or school funds may be used. You sent us out something that, Richard, is that what this was in reply to? Is this comment?
Yes, it was. I mean, this is sort of like, there's two issues here. There's school funds, but then there's on the fourth column, that's actions of town and school officials. And I'm wondering if I sent you the state law that's governs state employees.
Got that.
And then there's the Federal Hatch Act, of course, which doesn't allow you to do things on federal property to advance certain activities. And so here I was going to push this back to Liam and say, Liam, do we have anything anywhere in state law that, that says you if you're a town or a school, you can't provide resources to support, and then the official capacity of people can't be used to influence outcomes? I mean, we certainly can't tell Tom Hall he can't lobby for something in his unofficial capacity, but in his official capacity, we could say you can't do that. And that's what the state law tries to do, is distinguish between official capacity and unofficial capacity.
Yeah, so as far as personnel goes, there's a political activity provision in the personnel ordinance that limits employee behavior in some regard. So there is some passing reference to that, but certainly something I can research further.
So I had sent something out at the last minute. I don't know if you all saw it, with regard to address some of this, but it's my view or my knowledge, limited knowledge, that there's very little in municipal law, like there is in state law or federal law, about political involvement. But if you remember recently, the court upheld the prohibition against a school teacher serving on a council. You remember that, Liam, in Yarmouth or Cumberland? And I can't remember if that was an ordinance, what decision was based on in that kind of service. So that's, if it's covered in law, we're good.
I think if I'm
do you remember it?
at the risk of I'm going on a lot of limbs here, but I hopefully I believe that it was either a local ordinance or a policy that prohibited municipal employees, and that extended to school department employees, from serving in elected capacities at a local level. And
I think it was too, not state.
It was a school department employee who was elected to their town council, and they and I believe that the decision upheld that was a conflict, or that whatever the local provision was upheld, and that was they're prohibited from holding that office.
Because it didn't, as I recall, prohibit them from running, but if elected, they had to make a decision if they wanted to be an employee or an elected official, because you couldn't serve in both capacities.
Betsy's got her hand up.
I don't even.
Kind of different. Annalee, what you're saying is kind of different from this one. I mean, I don't know if we have language that says you can't serve, you can't be on council and be an employee, but a lot of towns do have that. But I can only provide a little bit of history, I guess, to this particular one.
I know what you're going to say, so go ahead for the other two.
Historically, we had not allowed, the school board in particular had, always taken out ads to say, please vote. And they had contacted parents to say, please vote in the referendum. That's neutral. Then a few years ago, they took a position that said, please vote yes. And their attorney said they were well within their power to do that. So they got a legal opinion from the school attorney. I don't know if the town attorney weighed in too, but they did get a legal opinion on that. So I don't know if by charter, obviously our attorneys will look over all of this if this gets pushed forward and say, well, you can't prohibit them from taking a position, or that's a perfectly fine position for a town charter to do. historically, it had never been done until a few years ago. It started where they got a legal opinion. In particular, I'm talking about the BOE because the town has never taken town councilors, we take positions on the referendums and on everything, but the town itself has never taken a position on anything that I know of, and especially not advertised. We just say, get out and vote, and here's how you register and all that. And the BOE had pretty much done the same until a few years back. And now I think once they got that legal opinion, they have continued forward with their advocacy because they said, of course, we support the school budget. We're taking it forward, and their legal, and I think the contention is that taxpayer funds are getting used to pay for those ads because, if you're not for the budget referendum and you want to vote no, your tax dollars just got used to have an ad run, albeit, it's not a lot of money. When you look at the overall $50-60 million budget for the school, it's a pretty small amount of money, but that's where the contention comes. So, I think it's worth a discussion and even a vote maybe, but they had never done it before, and then they got a legal opinion where it said they could.
I think there was an additional contention in that the school used proprietary information to also communicate information that was not available to opponents as it was available to proponents. Whether we could go that far or not, because I personally didn't hear lots, but I heard complaints from parents who had provided emails for school purposes only related to their children, and then they were getting, quote, political advocacy emails on that, which they hadn't authorized. So that's a different question, but that also was an issue. So, the issue is, if it's okay for them to do, can we, by charter, offer that same list be given to opponents as well as outside proponents? And then you really kind of get out there. But that was an issue as well. So that's what this is about. I'm pretty sure. You were showing us a personnel ordinance on political activity. This applies to just town employees, Liam?
That's correct. This is our personnel ordinance. Yep.
So they cannot, why they're an employee of the town. So that you're an employee of the town when you work for the Board of Education, are you not? Because some of the school board employees are in the town's, I think, retirement plan. The custodians might be, if I recall.
Yeah, so I expect that the school department would have a separate provision. This is a municipal ordinance that applies to municipal employees, but not necessarily school department employees.
But it says they could be on the Board of Education. This town employees looks like that they can, with the exception of on-call emergency personnel or Board of Education.
Elected to the town council or Board of Education. So on call, so a call firefighter.
Okay.
Could be for town council or the Board of Education without prohibition. That's the exception.
Or a substitute teacher?
I don't know the answer to that.
They're on call. Not in the same way that the call fire department, but they're paid per diem when they come to work.
And again, I don't know if they'd be classified for this instance as on-call emergency personnel would be a substitute teacher. I'm not stating that they're not emergent and needed, but I don't think that that's what this.
They're not emergency, you're right, but yeah. Yeah, so that's interesting. So we need to do some work on that in order to properly, I think, address this. So we are at 11:30. Do people have time to stay just a little bit longer to get through two more items that have been submitted to us so we can keep up?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, you do, Richard?
Mhm. Yep.
Liam?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so number 5, oh, good, this is the same topic from two people. To require the town's budget to have a vote on the municipal operating budget, and this says and capital, of greater than 3%. But the one that we got from one of the counselors was all budgets of the town council go for a vote, just like the school committee. He put it on that form. Did you guys get a copy of that and print it out?
I
put
didn't
it-
see it, but that's
No, I
okay.
didn't.
You got it, that's fine. So
He
we
put
can
it on the
move
contact form, and he said that that Article 5 budget of the town charter is related to the school side of the budget. When the residents vote on the budget referendum, and it's a vote on the school side of the budget only. So, and I don't know what those numbers mean. It was 47 point, whatever. Does anybody know, Leon, what that means? And the municipal side of the budget,
I think it's referring to the amount in millions.
is that what it is? And then the plus, okay, I didn't understand the numbers and the symbols that were put in. Do they have a limited amount of space on that form? Is that why this is abbreviated?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
So I don't know whether this is advocating that the town budget also be up for a vote at the same time the school budget is. I think that's a big issue. It's worth discussing because what he's put here is something the Charter Commission would already know by reading the charter. I mean, so is this a point of information or is this a suggestion? Do you know, Liam?
I think that, again, I don't want to speak for the counselor, but my thought is that he's suggesting there should be at least some discussion on whether the municipal side of the budget should go for an up or down vote by the voters.
That's how I interpreted that. So number 5 on the sheet from the Hanley Hamel et al. Kind of relates to the submission by Ken Johnson about that. So what are folks' thoughts on that?
I don't like the wording of the item 5. I mean, it's, we may have a situation, I mean, it's clear that the school budget is much larger than the town budget. So the school budget could be proposed by, 5%, the town budget could be flat, and the overall increase could be more than 3 mils. So I think if we want to focus on the school budget or on the town budget, then we should say the town budget. And so if we get to the point where a town budget is proposed and it would increase the mill rate allocated to the town budget by more than 3 mils or 1 mil or whatever the number is that we choose, then it can go to referendum. But I don't like conflating the two. It gets a little bit mixed up.
And I think if I hear you saying it should be, if it goes, it should be a yes or no vote, not related to any amounts.
Well, I don't know. I mean, here they're obviously suggesting if it's a big increase, it ought to go to the voters.
I see.
We have a $400,000 item on capital that goes to voters, and the intent here is if it's big, it goes to voters. If it's not, it doesn't. I'm just wondering how we define big in the context of just the municipal budget. Because
I get you.
the budget already goes. That's fine.
So what
Right.
about Alan? Where are you on this on having
That-
the concept of the town budget being voted on as well as the school budget?
Well, I kind of agree with Richard on that. His rationale makes sense. It might muddy things up a little bit if you lump them together. So, but Betsy's got her hand up, so maybe she's got some.
Okay, see, I can't see anybody till they speak. So thanks for telling, I don't know her hand's up, so I'm not ignoring her.
Oh, that's fine. You should. That doesn't bother me. So when the budget goes, even this goes out for referendum, we don't reference mill rate at all.
Right.
It says, do you want to spend this amount? And we usually detail out the amount of revenue that we're going to receive in. And mill rate is an estimate. It's not, we don't commit the property taxes until August. Also, the state plays a lot of games with both the schools and the municipalities. I mean, I support this in terms of, I mean, the reason we vote on the school budget is it's a state requirement. And then every 3 years, we're actually required to ask the voters if they even want to keep on voting on the school budget. So every 3 years, that vote comes up to say, do you want to keep voting on it? So if we wanted to make this kind of along with the state law, I think we might want to mimic the state law to say, that, you vote on the bottom line budget, and then we vote on the bottom line town budget, vote on the bottom line school budget separately. And then every 3 years, the voters are asked whether they want to continue to do that, just to keep it in line with the state. But I think the mill rate part is very tricky because, this year there was no appetite for much of a mill rate increase due to the pandemic. I just think it takes away a little bit from the voters, and, and I'm not saying anybody's going to ever want big increases, but you just don't know what the future could all, there might be a year where there is a big tax increase for a very good reason. I mean, and that'll trigger this, but other year, so I think it makes it really complicated because coming out with that bottom line mill rate really doesn't happen until the very last minute, and it's not referenced at all.
Yeah. I like your idea, Betsy, of keeping the parallel structure. It's administratively very simple. We vote on the school budget, we vote on the municipal one, and every 3 years we decide whether or not we want to continue.
Yeah, I like that idea too. I've made notes to kind of put that together for us for the next meeting. I like it. I support that.
I concur with that too.
And already had notes to that effect. So that gets us to the end of what we had planned for today's agenda. Our next meeting, is there anything else? I mean, I think we're supposed to be careful about bringing up things not on the agenda because of the public, who be paying attention to this and who might want to weigh in. So I think we have to be a little careful. So we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow. And we have on there specifically Article 6. I'd like to suggest, unless it's too late, to add it to this agenda because Tony's already published it. Because it seems to me publishing it ahead like this is problematic because a previous meeting might drive the next meeting's budget. But I mean, not budget, but agenda. So I'd like to suggest that we start Article 6 and any time left over, review any materials that we've received in the interim with regard to Article 5 and the notes that I'm going to try to put together before tomorrow's meeting to see if they accurately reflect what we said today. Is that
good.
Okay? Anybody have another suggestion?
No, that sounds great. Sounds great.
So we need to get added to this agenda, Liam, the review of Article 5 and new materials related to it, something broad enough so that we can discuss Article 5. Again.
How about continued discussion on Article 5 as a
Perfect.
second?
Yeah, perfect.
So really,
So what I did send out to people at the last minute, I'm sorry, I've had one Zoom meeting after another and I have 2 more to go today. I sent out some research. We had talked a little bit about the language in the current charter about the school budget, because Richard gave me things to think about that I'd never thought about before. So what I did is Liam sent us something on school budgets, but I noticed that what he sent us referred to many other sections. I gathered all those sections together, cut and pasted them into one document. And I attached that just a little bit before around 11 o'clock that had some of the other sections that were referred to. And I haven't studied it, but it seems like Richard's more on track than what's been done in the past. So I think we need to read all of those sections, see how they fit together, and probably eventually get a legal opinion. But the terminology is confusing me a little bit when it refers to these different kinds of school districts. So I'm hoping that you guys have a chance to read it and see if you can figure it out.
Sounds good. We'll take a look at it.
You already sent that out, Annalee?
I did this morning. I sent the summary of yesterday's meeting and I sent out this attachment that Liam's showing you.
Maybe I did see it. Hang on.
Yeah, I don't know if it helps, but I was on a school board that was, a SAD or an RSU. And it does kind of get confusing sometimes between language, but the way I learned how to think about it is those SADs and RSUs are little towns unto themselves. And they actually have a budget referendum meeting where people who show up and register and they pass the budget forward to referendum. And then the referendum voters do it, and so the Board of Education, puts together a budget. The budget referendum meeting is anybody who shows up at the meeting and validates the budget that the BOE has passed or makes amendments to it. They can do that right there. It's almost like a town meeting. It is a town meeting actually, but it's multiple towns. And then that goes forward to the voters of all the towns on the referendum. So if you see anything related to that, I haven't looked at this specifically, but I have spent a lot of time looking at our type of school district versus the MSAD type and RSU, because they are quite different. Really, the towns have no say over what the people have say, but the towns have zero say over what the MSADs and the RSUs do. Absolutely zero. They're pretty much like their own entities, legal entities.
Well, and all of that is true, Betsy, but the one that was sent out to us by Liam, which refers to school budgets and said that this format is the same, see this district, and it takes you back to how SADs do it or RSUs do it. And they refer back to all of these sections. So I've gathered all of the sections of the specifics of this very broad language on one document. And so I think it's worthy of some discussion about just what, because sometimes we just take for granted what we're told. And
no, I totally agree with you. I was just trying to say, if you see something about like the budget referendum meeting, that's referring to the other style, because it's a odd
and
thing that we don't have. The town council passes to referendum what's going to go before the voters.
But the question, you weren't at the meeting, the question that was raised is that there is one sentence in our current charter that says I'm paraphrasing, that the council looks at the bottom line, but there's other sections in our charter that's way more specific than that. So is that a conflict? And what does the state law say about the authority of municipal school departments? And so that's what we were trying to look at as opposed to what we've been told.
Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. So thanks for the clarity, and I'll get caught up on your past meetings. I found a good way to find them. So
yeah.
So,
And so I know that, you've been on one of those boards. I've worked for a ton of them, and as well as municipal ones. And, I know what we're told, and what we're told isn't always what it is.
law changes too.
Yes, there are. So with that, is there any other business? Thank you for staying over. We will call this meeting adjourned.
Another great job. I just really
Well,
good. Very good job. Thanks a lot.
For some reason, Annalee, I didn't get what you sent this morning. I don't know why.
is it amfoster@gmail.com?
amfoster04 at
There's
Gmail.
where I left off the 04. I'll send it again.
And I don't think I got what Richard had sent.
Well, that's because I didn't put the 04 in either, because I was using Annalee's email address.
Oh, okay.
If she screws up, I screw up. So,
Yeah.
Well, that clears it up. All
I'll
right.
send it to you.
Thank you.
Ian Foster out there that has brilliant ideas about our town charter. So hopefully
I'm surprised.
Yeah,
it'll weigh
Come
in.
back.
it didn't come back, so somebody else has.
Somebody's got it. Often somebody says, I don't think you meant this for me. And I haven't heard that so far. So
That'd be funny if they sent some submissions in. Yeah, I think you should do this.
we're broadening. I'll send it as soon as we sign off. I'm going to send it again. You got them, Liam, it looks like, because I got your email straightened out. So I will send it to you right away.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan. Okay. See you.